We just wanted to document our journey through Kyle's total pancreatectomy and islet cell transplant so that we never forget God's faithfulness to our family. We got to spend some really sweet time with our girls before we left, and that was just moments that we really, really cherished before we set off to be without them for a month. We went to Charleston on Tuesday, and then Wednesday morning we woke up, had fasting blood work and an ultrasound, and then we went down to King Street and spent some time looking around Charleston. We got to check into the hospital around 3 p.m. and got set up for the trial drug that we opted in on called Reprexin, which is basically, in short, an anti-inflammatory with the goal of having more islet cells live due to less inflammation. We had to start this drug within 12 hours of the estimated harvest time, so we needed to start at 2 a.m. in the morning for a 2 p.m. harvest time. That was what they estimated. They ended up doing an IJ line in his neck, which is the main catheter placed into his jugular, and then they did an x-ray to make sure it was placed properly. They came in around 5:20 to get him for his surgery, and he was joking and just his normal charming self, and it was really good to see him in such good spirits. The last thing Kyle remembers is leaning forward for his epidural. Then they allowed me to come back in and say goodbye to him, which he doesn't even remember, but he was doing fine, just a little nervous about starting surgery. Surgery lasted about 5 hours before I got to see him in ICU. I can only attribute the peace that we had during his surgery to answered prayer and God just being with us. It was surprisingly calm and light in the waiting room with Kyle's family as we waited for the hours of surgery. Betsy, the nurse coordinator, who was just wonderful, she came around to give us updates periodically. Around 11:30 in the morning, Betsy gave us some news regarding Kyle's genetic makeup, that we had received his test results back, and he has the cystic fibrosis gene, CFTR1, and also the SPINK1 gene, which are mutated genes that are linked to chronic pancreatitis. So 12 years of non-diagnosis, just knowing that this was familial, we got an answer the same day of surgery, which was just really amazing and good to know that we were making, once again, we were confirmed that this was the right decision, and so we could move forward from this horrible disease. Around 2:30, Kyle came out of surgery and he was in ICU and waiting for the transplant, and they let me come in and see him. When I saw Kyle in ICU, he was hooked up to every machine I could think of. I knew that the intubation was breathing for him, and he had tubes and wires all over, but he had really good color, and I knew that everything was helping him, and that was just really encouraging, and it was actually quite peaceful just being able to hold his hand. His cell count through the harvest was 125,000. They would have liked to seen around 180,000, but we just hoped that those 125,000 that they were able to harvest were good cells and that they would all latch on. Our first thoughts were a little discouraged, thinking about the future with insulin dependence, but we prayed and asked God to give him independence from diabetes, and we just held to that. It took about an hour or two for the transfusion, and I was able to sit in the waiting room with my family and Kyle's family. Once they finished the transfusion, they closed the portal vein and brought him back to the ICU. When he was in ICU, they started to wake him up to prepare him for extubation to get him breathing on his own. They had to make him completely lucid in order to pull the tube out, and this was probably the hardest part for me to watch, and it was just very difficult to see him in distress while they did that. He does not remember any of it due to the medications they have him on, ketamine and some things that make him loopy in order to accomplish what they need to get done. They just did an amazing job and were really kind and caring. So these were his first moments after the breathing tube was taken out. He was on a constant insulin drip and his vitals were perfect. We were really encouraged and he was just doing so amazing. The next morning we got him up and into a chair for a few hours. Then he took a rest and a little nap. That was a lot on him. I was just Then it came time for him to walk. It was only 24 hours after surgery, and this might have been the toughest moment for him, was getting up. He was so strong, though. He said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to walk now, and wouldn't let anybody tell him he couldn't do it. So he got up and smiled about it, and he was on a roll. Our ICU nurse, Steve, was just amazing at encouraging Kyle to take the next step as far as he could go, and Kyle was able to take about 2 laps around the ICU floor. That helped a lot with preventing blood clots and getting Kyle's insides moving again. He took a rest in the chair for about 2 or 3 hours, and then he slept all night long. The next 2 days in ICU, his blood sugar levels were amazing. He required almost no insulin for about 36 hours. Kyle used the spirometer almost the whole time because one of his main problems was being able to take deep breaths due to the abdominal pain, and this caused him to have just low oxygen, and so he wore oxygen a lot, but this machine really helped him be able to take deep breaths and improve his lung capacity. On day 4, Kyle was released from ICU onto the main floor, the 6th floor. He had a beautiful view where he could remain to recover for the rest of his stay. They monitored his incision to ensure that it did not get infected. They managed his diabetes and also allowed him to start eating and monitored his pain control. Pain control was really one of the main struggles that Kyle had while in the hospital, but he was a trooper even after his epidural slipped out around the end of day 5. He started having excruciating pain, but they were able to have pain management come and work with him, and they got him fairly stable as quickly as they could, and he was able to keep walking and progress in his recovery. As you can see, he got his sense of humor back very quickly. Around day 7, they were able to remove his staples and exchange them for steri strips and glue. They also added the lidocaine patches for topical pain relief, and this seemed to really help him. They removed his drainage tube from his abdomen. This actually bled quite a lot, a little moment, which was actually a little nerve-wracking, was that it bled so much that it really panicked Kyle, and as well as it dropped his hemoglobin below the normal limits. So he had a visceral vagal response to the event and passed out and became unresponsive for a moment. But the doctors rushed in and everybody was able to help him, and he regained consciousness fairly quickly. And they did some testing to ensure that everything was going okay on the inside and that there weren't any clots or anything like that. So we were pretty comforted that everything was back to normal, and he ended up with a blood transfusion to get his hemoglobin back into the normal limits, and then he was able to continue to heal and start walking again. And by the 2nd week, he was walking almost 6 laps around the entire top floor. So he was really doing an excellent job of progressing and moving forward. He was able to leave on day 12 after we had gotten his pain under control, and he had gone through diabetes training and nutritional training. We were definitely ready to leave and push forward with our diabetes and disease-free from pancreatitis. He was excited but still very sick and very tired, and has still been in a lot of pain, but has continued to move forward. We did a lot of walking when we were in Charleston, but now that we're back home in Jacksonville, he's done even better and better each day. So please just keep him in your prayers, and thank you so much for your support and prayers for Kyle through this journey, and we just appreciate you all so much.